Right, so Facebook has announced an all new name for its company, and while the name change in and of itself isn't too big of a deal, the vision that they have for the future of internet is, well, it's kind of creepy and really could change life as we know it. We're going to talk about that on this episode. My name is Luke Clayton, and this is Connection Culture. Well, welcome back to Connection Culture, or welcome for the first time if this happens to be the first episode that you're watching or listening to. We are certainly glad to have you here. And I have to start right off the bat with saying you really, if you haven't yet, you need to make sure that you are subscribed to our email notifications about new episodes because this is going to be yet another episode completely dedicated to talking about Facebook, and of course it's not going to all be positive. And so Facebook and their algorithms, they're not going to be a massive fan of this particular episode, just per usual. So you want to make sure rather that you're not missing our episodes, and if it's up to Facebook, well, they might just suppress our content so that you don't get to see it. So make sure that you are subscribed by way of email, and you can do that just by heading over to mustincrease.com/cc. That's mustincrease.com/letter C, and that way you can sign up to get our new episodes delivered right to your inbox every time we release a new one. Okay, so today's episode, right off the bat, I'll tell you, it's going to be a little bit more maybe free-flowing. This event, as at time of recording, the event where Facebook announced their new name and all their new vision for the future and all this stuff, as we'll get into, well, they just had it this morning, as I said, at time of recording, and that would be Thursday, October 28th. And so they just had this event this morning. And that means that I didn't really have maybe my usual, whatever you want to call it, prep time to, come up with, an organized outline for this episode or content that is maybe a little bit more studied out, rehearsed, whatever you want to call it. A lot of times, in fact, that's usually what I'm trying to do is to organize my thoughts beforehand. But I haven't had a lot of time to do that because of how recent this episode was, or this event was rather, from Facebook, and I just wanted to be able to discuss it while it is fresh on my mind. And so, anyways, we're going to be a little bit more free flowing today, if that's all right with you. I'm just really going to be taking a lot of my talking points from articles that I'll be reading here that I've been looked up. We'll just kind of skim through. So, anyways, let's get right to it. Well, probably the biggest talk of the event was the fact that Facebook did officially change the name of their company. Now, this is something that they announced they would do about a week or two ago, and there's some speculation that perhaps their biggest motivation in doing this was so that they could maybe distract from some of the negative PR that they've been getting for the past few weeks and few months, and that this might help. There's all types of theories that they're doing this because a new name might help it in terms of brand recognition and whatever. Some people speculate that it's a distraction ploy, more or less, and maybe some of that is true. However, we do need to realize that it's not necessarily uncommon for something like this to happen. In fact, what I should say is three of the top tech companies in the world have all changed their name at some point over the past about 15 years. Apple used to be Apple Computers, and when they started making more than computers, they changed their name to just Apple Incorporated. And although that's not a drastic name change necessarily, it was an appropriate and fitting name change because Apple now, there's many people that don't even own an Apple computer, but they own an Apple iPhone or iPad or something like that. And so that was a very fitting name change, and their motivation motivation for that, of course, was, well, now we need to broaden our name in a way to where it encompasses all that we're doing. We're making much more than computers, so we're not going to call ourselves Apple Computers anymore, and they changed it into Apple Incorporated. Perhaps a more and like I said, that's a pretty mild example because it's not a massive change. So perhaps a more recent example of a name change was a few years ago. Google changed their name to Alphabet, and there may be some of you out there that you didn't even know that, you didn't even realize that that name change. In the tech world, people were. They were kind of made a big deal of it when it happened, but most people didn't even know. And I dare say that's probably the case with Facebook. There's probably a lot of people out there that, they realize, or rather they don't realize, sorry, free flowing here. So kind of struggling with my words. They don't realize that Facebook has changed their name, and they really, almost never will. And so anyway, so they changed their name regardless of the reason why. Like I said, the reason that Google changed their main company parent name to Alphabet back in the day is for similar reasons, because they're broadening their scope of what they do. Google started as a search engine. And when you think the word Google, that's probably the number one thing that you associate with the term. In fact, Google is now its own verb. You say, I'm going to Google that. And so the name Google is associated mostly with search engines. But if you know anything about Google, they're doing a whole lot more than just the search engines now. They have a lot of online productivity tools. They're making hardware. They're developing software. They're doing all kinds of things. And so their parent company, Alphabet, kind of maybe better represents the fact that, hey, Google is probably the biggest part of us, but we do a lot more than that. And I really do believe that is a lot of the motivation. And according to what Facebook had to say, it is their motivation in making this move, is that now their company it has branched out and is doing so much more than just Facebook. In fact, one of the biggest examples of this is the fact that Facebook, for the longest time, has owned Instagram for probably about 10 years now. Yeah, it was 2011, I believe, when they bought Instagram. So it's owned Instagram for 10 years. And obviously they're similar platforms, but in that they're both social media, but they are very different in and of themselves. And then another app they own is WhatsApp. It's a messaging communication app. And then they have other things that they're doing, though, beyond just these social type of apps. In terms of the software, they've actually started to develop the hardware. They have the Oculus VR headset, and so on and so forth. So changing their name, I believe, was just perhaps it was a little bit motivated by to distract from the bad press they've been getting. But I think, knowing a company like Facebook and how just massive it is, the bigger the company, the bigger the organization, the more difficult for them to pivot and make sudden decisions and changes like this. Not to say that it would necessarily be impossible for Mark Zuckerberg to a couple weeks ago say, "Hey, there's a lot of mess in the press right now about us. Let's change our name." Not to say that would be an impossible pivot to make. But given how just the nature of their presentation and so on and so forth, I would venture to say that this has probably been in their long-term strategy for some time. And given that Mark Zuckerberg himself kind of gave a little bit of a preview of his vision for the future of the internet, which again we'll get into here in just a moment, given that he did that here just within, I think it was over the summer, and he definitely even alluded, without people realizing necessarily, he definitely alluded to their new name during that time. I don't really believe that their only motivation for doing this is for press. In fact, I would say that it's not even on their top reasons for doing it. Maybe it's a nice ancillary reason, because now that they have the new name, maybe it does distract. It probably won't. But anyways, all that to say, they did change their name. And here it is. You're ready for it. Big announcement. You've probably already Googled it while you were sitting here listening to me ramble or whatever. So you probably already know it. So for those of you who Googled, say it with me. It is called Meta. META, Meta. And They have gone as far as to claim the Twitter handle at Meta. They have already purchased the domain meta.com. And if you go to meta.com, you can read all about it. And so again, Facebook, to be clear, Facebook is not going away. They are not getting rid of Facebook. It's not that they have rebranded their social media platform that kind of started everything. No, absolutely not. The Facebook, if you go log into, open your Facebook app right now or go to facebook.com, you are still going to log into Facebook. It's still called Facebook. It still has the letter F logo and all of that. That has not changed. However, Facebook is no longer the parent company. Facebook is now just one of the kind of subsidiaries of the subsidiaries, I should say, of the main company. Oh, and by the way, for those of you watching, I just noticed I forgot to change the setting on my computer behind me. So now you get to watch and very likely be distracted by a awesome slideshow of my very cute, beautiful daughter. So enjoy that. For those of you listening, if you want to be distracted, go check out the video. That's running behind me right now as my screensaver. So anyways, back, speaking of distractions, let's get back to talking about Facebook and their all new name. And let's move beyond that and talk about what this really means. So Meta, what does that mean? Well, I suppose we could dive into the technical definitions and so forth, but really what Meta means to Facebook is associated again with the vision that Mark Zuckerberg has begun to cast, even like I said, most recently before this event back in the summer, and where he envisions something that Facebook is calling and that Mark Zuckerberg has termed something they call the metaverse. The metaverse is a virtual world where we can exist in a virtual format. His argument is that when it comes to our interactions with the internet, as human beings, it would be more natural for us to be able to interact with the same maybe features of the internet, but in a way that we're not tied to using some type of screen, whether that be a computer, whether that be a tablet or a smartphone, and his argument can be understandable in that, there is a problem with looking down too much at your screen and whatever. But what he's saying is you could interact in theory with the same virtual digital world of the internet that you now know and access through a screen. You can access that through virtual reality. And this is where developing their VR headsets has been a big part of their business. And by the way, they are committed to, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but they are committed to investing $10 billion in the next year alone into this concept. And so they walked through what this might look like. And a lot of this presentation, and if I haven't mentioned this yet, admittedly, I did not watch the entire thing because I just can't bring myself to watch Mark Zuckerberg for any extended period of time. The guy truly has no personality. He's very robotic. And a lot of these techie people are, I've watched many an Apple event and noticed the same thing that, hey, these people that are brilliant in terms of they're technically brilliant, they often are rather awkward communicators. But Zuckerberg takes the cake. I mean, he really does feel like a robot. And I mean, I feel kind of, I don't want to feel too bad for Zuckerberg, but I feel for him a little bit because it's like you can tell this guy is just wired to sit there in a dark room and program and code. And he does not necessarily, he was definitely not created to communicate and to cast vision and to speak, but nonetheless, he is the founder and CEO of the company. So he is doing it. So anyways, all that to say, I did not watch the entire presentation. However, I did kind of skip through and watch little portions of it. And if you want to go watch the whole thing, you can watch it at meta.com. However, what I have here is just kind of an article that highlights a lot of the high moments. So that's kind of what I'm going to flow through here, use as my guide for the remainder of our episode here. And I will put a link in the description if you want to read the article yourself. It's an article from venturebeat.com. And I'm sure there's many tech blogs out there that kind of gave their summary of this event, but this happens to be the one that one of the first ones I stumbled on, and I like the way it kind of summed everything up. So here we are, and again, I will put the link if you want to read the full article. And they simply tied it: Facebook unveils Horizon Home, social VR, Messenger VR calls, and fitness VR on the road to metaverse. So again, kind of some stuff. I've kind of gotten ahead of myself a little bit on some of my talking points here, but let's kind of dive into some of the high points, as I said. So let's talk a little bit more about this metaverse. In a press briefing that was ahead of the event, Zuckerberg talked about how the company views the metaverse. He says, we basically think of the metaverse as the successor of the mobile internet, in the sense that the mobile internet didn't completely replace everything before it. I'm going to come back to I'm going to read the whole thing, and then I'm going to come back and break this statement down, because there's a lot in here that if you just read over it, glaze over it, listen to it fast, you might miss it, but there's some really shocking stuff in here. Anyways, I'm again getting ahead of myself, so let me just finish his quote. It's not that the metaverse is going to completely replace something that comes before it, but it's the next platform. In that sense, it's not a thing that a company builds. It's a broader platform that I think we're all going to contribute towards building in a way that is open and interoperable. Here is, I want to go back to the first part of the statement. He says, we basically think of the metaverse as the successor of the mobile internet. And here's why. Because in the sense that the mobile internet did not completely replace everything that came before it. So right there, it indicates that what he is seeking to do is to replace even more of reality as we know it, as really it's intended to be. He's basically saying where a mobile internet experience did not replace many of your real life experiences. But let's hold up right there. But it did. There are many real life amazing experiences that the mobile internet has already replaced. So he's basically saying, but it didn't replace enough. And so our metaverse is designed to take it to the next level. And okay, yeah, sure, it's not going to replace everything, but it's strongly implying that it's going to replace a lot. If Zuckerberg has his way, and if Meta, Facebook, if their vision plays out like they are hoping, then what we're going to see and I don't know. I mean, maybe a few decades from now. I really don't know how long it would take for all this to catch on. Though they are again putting billions of dollars in development, so it seems like it's coming pretty fast. And technology has a history of advancing very rapidly. Nonetheless, regardless of the timeline, if Zuckerberg and Facebook and Meta, whatever, have their way, then they are trying to create a world in the future where virtually all of our interaction is done through a digital interface. And yeah, okay, it's not a screen. It's not that you're necessarily sitting there with your screen in hand anymore, but you are putting on a VR headset. The way he kind of describes it is I mean, you more or less live in a world where you wake up, you put on the VR headset, the VR glasses, and you just begin to exist virtually in a world. You go to the virtual office, you go to the virtual grocery store, you go to maybe you go to have virtual coffee or virtual dinner or something like that with someone. All of these virtual interaction experiences, and at the end of the day, you take your headset off and you fall back asleep, and the cycle starts all over the next day. Now, I'm sure Zuckerberg on his at face value would deny that. Like I'm sure he would say, no, that's not what we want. No, that's crazy. It's crazy talk. We're just trying to enhance and make the world better. And there are things about this that are potentially cool. I'm going to try to speak about some potential possibilities that are I could maybe see the benefit of. But I mean, if this is the vision that one of the biggest tech companies in the world and biggest leaders in the tech industry has for the future, I don't know. To me, it's really frightening. And I'm a techie guy. I mean, it's very clear. I literally host 2 podcasts centered around the ideas of media and technology. It's clearly something that I enjoy. I mean, I keep up with all the latest gadgetry, if you will, and I do love my Apple gadgets and all that. I mean, this is something that I enjoy, but yet this I'm wondering, man, at what point are we taking this too far? Let's read a little bit more about what he says. He says we think about a metaverse as it's an embodied internet. So instead of looking at the internet or at documents, which I think is sort of the experience that we have today, and he's right. I mean, we would use a device, like this, an iPad I'm holding here, to interact with a web page or even a digital document. So he says, instead of looking at the internet or documents, it's an internet that you're going to be in and a part of something that's going to feel that's a big word. I can't say it. Qualitatively. Anyways, you go look at the article and you read it for me. I don't know why I can't pronounce this word, but he's basically saying it's going to feel very, very different. And the defining characteristics that we think is going to exist here is the metaverse is the feeling of presence. Like you're right there with another person or another place. So, I mean, he's really just affirming what I just said. His vision is that you don't have to physically interact with someone. You don't have to do that anymore. Hey, wait, you know what? Because it's just as good if you do it virtually. If you put on your little headset and you go live in virtual metaverse land. So this is just, again, it's just really, really almost terrifying. Now, they kind of moved ahead as I got through the presentation, and they showed a few scenarios, and these are very futuristic scenarios, and they admitted that. It's not like this is where the technology is at now, but I mean, literally, there are these depictions that they did, video depictions of, I mean, just like you would picture in like Star Wars, if you've ever watched Star Wars or some sci-fi movie where they're interacting with a hologram, even some of the Marvel movies have this, where, instead of you're on a FaceTime or Zoom call, you're on this 3D hologram where people are actually, seems like there's some kind of ghostly figure of them or whatever. Again, go watch the presentation that Facebook did, and you can see what they're talking about here. I mean, so that's kind of what they depict. So they picture, hey, what if we could get together and play a game, like a game of chess on a virtual chessboard? I got the glasses on, I just toggle them, and now this virtual chessboard pops up here on the table, and then my virtual buddy, he's got his headset on there, and he sits down across from me, and we play virtual chess. Now, again, what am I saying that I would never do something like that. I would never interact in that way. Well, no, I mean, it certainly seems interesting, and I can see the value. For example, if I live in another state, away from somebody, doing something like this is great. But again, my concern, and I think many's concern, is that whenever you can do something in theory more conveniently, then you're more likely to do the more convenient experience, even if it's the less, how should I say, maybe valuable experience. So, for example, I don't, I have family that lives about a 4 to 5 hour drive away from me. Well, it's very easy for me to get on the phone and give them a call, and I will do that from time to time. But and I don't know if this is, I can't say. It's hard to play the what if game, but it's like, well, what if I didn't have the ability to call them? Would I go visit them more often? And I will say, I am all about efficiency and productivity. And so I have taken advantage of this in, just recent months. I mean, the past year and a half, it's just become standard to me to do things over a Zoom meeting. In fact, if you ever watch any of our episodes that include guests, I mean, 4 out of 5 times it's a virtual guest, because they're long distance, and so it's just more practical to do it that way. So I'm all about the practicality of that in some applications. But my concern here, again, is that we don't want to make things so convenient and so quote unquote lifelike that they do replace that they do truly replace reality. So that they go through these examples of like I said, playing games and social, and then they start talking about social interaction where you could have a hangout where you're wearing this, again, a VR headset or the glasses or whatever, and hey, I'm just hanging out, looking around, hanging out here with all my friends. There's my buddy sitting right there, in this chair. He's not really there, but virtually, when I put my glasses on, I can see him sitting there. And again, all of this stuff seems really cool. It seems really cool. And they even talk about, oh, well, hey, here's maybe some potentially extra things you can do. And again, I don't really want to dive into all of this, but they also apply this to even work. Like, oh, you could go to a virtual conference room and you could sit here and you could have a meeting, but feel like you're right in the room, even though you're not. They talked about how this could be applied to fitness, kind of like going to a virtual gym. And, there's already the idea of, watching some type of workout video. Well, that was introduced in like the 70s or 80s. It's not like it's a new concept, but this obviously takes it to a whole new level. Put your headset on, and now you're in the virtual gym. And so they talked about all these different applications of it. And again, it's not that I'm completely resistant to the concept. What we all have to worry, or I don't want to use the word worry necessarily, but we need to take note of is that we already live in a world where literally kids and adults alike cannot pry their screens. We can't pry screens out of their hands, where they're always walking around looking down at their screen. And it seems like, just the statistics alone tell us that kids are spending like 7.5 or more hours a day on screens for purposes of entertainment. Okay, not because they're doing something productive like working on a school project or something like that. No, they're doing it. They're spending that much time on social media, playing games, watching streaming content. And one way I can understand how Zuckerberg's like, well, dude, we're halfway there. Let's just take it the rest of the way. We already got, people spending half their waking hours on a screen. Let's just give them an excuse to spend their entire existence in a virtual world. That's something I don't want to live in. And in theory, it's something that fortunately, it doesn't look like we're going to be forced to do it. Who knows what the wonderful government would do with technology like this. That's a whole other conspiracy theory in and of itself. But but this is not a world I want to live in. This is not a society. Society is already way too hooked on their screens. And this is not something that I want my society, my culture to do. It's just, now it's just we live in this metaverse. Like I said, we wake up every day, we put on our headset, we put on the glasses, we flip a switch, and boom, we just do everything we need to. And sadly, over the past year and a half, we've been conditioned for this. And, now we're all working from home. We're all figuring out how to, avoid personal connection. Now, again, there's benefits of this. I've worked from home, and I've been working from home for years before the pandemic, before it was, required. And I do see a fantastic value in working remotely. And I could do a whole other episode. It would be completely off topic, but I could do a whole other episode about what I believe to be the values of virtual work and versus, forcing people to come into an office. So I see that there is definitely an application of this idea of being virtual and remote. But again, this seems to be taking it to a whole new extreme. And it seems to be, to me, that it's like, if we can't fight the temptation of the experience, because think about it, what is the experience? What's so valuable about the experience of looking down at a screen and scrolling? Why? If I were to just, take a black, a little black device with a black screen, nothing on it, and just say, hey, what's super fun? Just do this all day. Just scroll. Just swipe your finger up it, and just look at it and watch your thumb do that. Well, that's not fun. That activity in and of itself is not enjoyable. Nobody in their right mind would just sit there and watch their thumb slide up and down a blank black piece of glass. Well, but now when you add interactive content to that, it makes a whole extreme. So now doing this activity that otherwise seems completely mindless and idiotic becomes a favorite pastime of the first of everybody in the first world that lives in a first world country. And so while right now it might seem very absurd at face value to be like, yeah, I ain't put on a headset and living in it all day. But what if they could make it so enticing and they could make virtual content so exciting that you said, yeah, I'm all in on that. As stupid as this feels, as dumb as this feels to have this headset on and whatever, as stupid as think of how dumb you're going to look. I mean, I've seen, I've messed around with VR and I've seen people VR. I mean, my brother, for example, has a VR headset that he has connected to his PlayStation 4, and he'll play these games and whatever, and it looks hilarious from the outside. But to what he's seeing, I mean, he's in this virtual world. I mean, just that's a total side note. Think of how absurd we will all look. But if the content is enticing enough, could it keep us engaged for hours and hours of our days, of our lives? So this is the concern. And really, it doesn't matter if you're interacting through a screen in your hand, a screen that sits on your desk, a screen that hangs on your wall, or a screen that you wear on your face. The principle, while the different mediums, if you will, are going to change and they're going to advance, the principle is what matters. We have to limit ourselves. It's all stuff we talked about before. So here's the challenge, if you will. We have to, but it's nothing, no challenge that I haven't issued before. We have to teach ourselves, and we have to force ourselves to stop being addicted to these screens. We have to put the measures in place and use, for example, like I've talked about with iPhones and iPads, use the screen time limits that are built in. And then beyond that, though, just do everything we can, turning off the notifications, deleting the distracting apps, doing what it takes to avoid our lives to avoid being sucked into these screens or whatever virtual world it is, because the virtual world is already there. It's like Zuckerberg is saying, it's already there. The internet, the virtual World Wide Web is already there. He's just going to change how we interact with it. So we're already getting sucked into it. We're already allowing ourselves to become obsessive with a world that is not even real, with Instagram influencers and so-called followers and friends that portray a life of perfection but live a life of misery. We're already interacting and letting ourselves get sucked into and I'm saying we because I'm guilty of this as well, of getting sucked into fictional stories and worlds and spending hours and hours binging and watching this content. We're already doing this. We're already allowing ourselves to do this. And a little bit of enjoyment and indulgence isn't like it's a problem. It's overindulgence. It's not knowing when to stop. I mean, I will say, the only reason I find myself particularly possibly immune from being addicted to this metaverse is I've wore VR headsets before, and they make me sick. I mean, literally, like they make me nauseous. So maybe I'll just have natural immunity to this. But that was a total rabbit trail and going off topic there. But all this, and the point is that it doesn't matter if it's a VR headset or a little screen in your pocket. You have to learn the disciplines control now. And if you're a parent, your kids do not need to be exposed to that world near as much as they are. I think it's valuable for a child to learn, how to use their phone or whatever, how to use technology. I think it's valuable, I should say, that the parent be the one guiding them in the process, because if not, the kid's going to figure it out on their own, and that's when things can potentially, that those devices can be used for bad. But there's certainly no reason, in my mind, there's no reason why a child, under the age of, I don't know what the age is, but definitely their late teens, there's no reason to me why in middle school, junior high, maybe, and even most teenagers, most of the teen years, there's no reason why they would need to have, to me, I just can't think of the reason why they would need to be on social media during those years. I just can't think of it. It's like you go to school every day. You interact with people every day. You don't need this. That's why they invented Facebook, right? So that you could stay connected with all the people that you graduated, the college and the high school friends that you don't have anymore. Why does a teenager need that? The friends are here. They are literally around you. So I can't think of a reason why they would need to even be on social media at all. And I can't think of a reason why they would need unbridled, untethered access to internet content and screens with no restriction. I can't think of a reason why we would not, as parents, put those limits in place. And I think deep down the reason might be, though, because we know that it would for some of us, it would be very hypocritical. Because we'd be limiting them and we'd be fussing at them for spending too much time on their screens while we did the same exact thing. So the challenge is just a summary of everything, of many of the things we've issued challenges about over the past several weeks. Limit yourself and limit your kids. And if you aren't willing to do either of those, I mean, you really, then you're addicted, unfortunately. Limit yourself, limit your kids. The metaverse is a frightening concept because we know of the potential of it to be abused. We know the potential addiction that could come from that just because of the addiction we see now, and all we have are these, like I said, little pocket screens. How much more addicting and overwhelming will it be when we are able to do this from a virtual headset or in this VR metaverse environment? So let's put those limits on. Let's limit our kids. And again, check out the Facebook stuff. Again, I don't think it's all bad. I really don't. But it is bad. It is going to be bad and devastating and very unhealthy for humanity in general, kids and adults alike, when it becomes, and I'm saying when because it is a when, it's a matter of when, not if, when it becomes something so addictive that people literally live their lives in a virtual world. But again, we're already doing that. Well, Connection Culture is a production of the Must Increase Network, and if you enjoy this content, then I hope you will subscribe. We're available on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you are listening to podcasts. If you think that this content would be helpful to someone else, then share it. Share it with a friend. Tell them to subscribe as well, because you need to be a contributor. We're seeing the Zuckerbergs of this world, and yes, he is seeming to be the world's most awful techie villain lately, but we're seeing these people of this world, people like Zuckerberg and other big executives in Hollywood and in tech companies and whatever, and they are the creators right now. They're the ones creating the content. We're just consuming it. Well, we need to turn the table a little bit. We need to have a part in that creative process. We need to be contributors, not just consumers, because it is so much more fulfilling when you get behind what you believe in. When you say, hey, I had a part in that, even if it's something seemingly small and simple, like just sharing content like this with somebody else, it actually is a significant contribution to creating and helping other content that is valuable, positive, and helpful get into the hands of others. So you're going to find when you get involved in this way, you're going to find that it's so much more fulfilling to be a meaningful creative contributor than it is to just be a mindless, constant consumer. I'll see you next time, right here on Connection Culture.